So what is governance? Governance, if you want to replace it with another word, is controls. And every organization, every project needs some sort of controls, otherwise things can go easily out of hand. What you need is a framework, some processes, some functions satisfied by mostly senior managers that would oversee how project management is done inside the organization. Project governance is an oversight function, so someone who is looking at the work that is being done. For us to have governance, we need to assign single points of accountability so we know who is supposed to do what. We need to have a process for issue management and resolution, and we also need to set up a process for how information is shared and how communication happens within the project. Now, typically, governance is already inside the organization. Either you have a steering committee, you have a governance board, or it could be a PMO with, functions for oversight, maybe a controlling PMO that checks what project managers are doing, sets the standards, provides templates so things are being done consistently. And that's usually good if the PMO is doing the right job. In other instances, you find an organization has no controls whatsoever, no PMO, nobody actually doing project oversight, so it's up to the PM. And in other instances, you will see too much control. So a lot of governance sometimes is more than what you need and starts to stand in the way. So you don't want very little or relaxed governance, and you don't want too much governance. You need to have a nice, fine balance. I think the way to structure governance would be to have just enough for the size of the project that you have and for the criticality of the project that you have on hand. If you're wondering what goes into governance, here are the components of governance. Change. So how we do change, communication, how it's going to be done. So basically we need processes for these things. Change, communication, documentation, decision making, internal stakeholder alignment with the process requirements, review and approval of changes above your level, above your PM level, risk and issue identification, escalation, resolutions, stage gate or phase reviews, guidelines for aligning your project governance with the organizational strategy, project lifecycle and development approach that you want to adopt, project organizational chart with all the roles, project success and deliverable acceptance criteria, relationship among the project team, organizational groups, and external stakeholders. You need to figure a lot of these things for you to have controls in your project. Otherwise, things can start to go wrong. Now, Agile-based methodologies provide better governance for your project. How do they do that? They have these 2-week sprints, and they do them a bit at a time. The resources are only allocated for a short time. At the end of the sprint, they do a review session and a retrospective. They go over what was completed in it, and they're able to take feedback and implement it into the next sprint. So this means we have many more frequent reviews of the work that we're doing compared to, let's say, predictive, where we're waiting for a 3-month phase maybe to complete. In addition, in Agile, they tie these sprints to releases. So a major release that they're working on, let's say for next year, is going to be made of several sprints, and every sprint is tied to that specific release and is put on some sort of a story map or roadmap, and they know where they headed on that specific product. They know at this time that this specific milestone or deliverable needs to be completed. Why? Because they map the deliverables of these sprints on the milestone chart or maybe vision chart that they have for that product. So this allows for mapping out expectations for different time frames when certain things need to happen, allows for review at these key points, and allows for feedback to be taken in so that we can enhance the rest of the work that needs to happen on the product. The other way that Agile helps in governance is that they have these daily stand-up meetings. With the daily stand-up meetings, we're meeting for 15 minutes every morning, and we're talking about what we've accomplished, where we're at, what could stand in the way or hinder the progress for today, and we try to clear those up. Usually the project lead will try to clear those blockers out of the way so that we can progress in our project. So that gives you that kind of an opportunity to have almost real-time oversight on what's going on in your project. Now, this may have been covered in the previous 45 videos, the older ones, but the governance board usually is made up of senior executives who have insights, decision-making capabilities, and could be made of a few functional roles like head of engineering, head of finance, maybe the CEO, and most of the time would include the portfolio management function, because they are probably, or if let's say you are rolling up to a program, your project rolls up to a program, then the program manager probably sits on that board. Otherwise, you might see the portfolio manager sitting on the board, and they could actually be the chairman of that board, or it could be the product owner, the one that's looking to receive the end result of your project. They tend to be the chairman of that board. But you would have this insightful decision-making bunch of senior executives who would help in major decisions that go beyond your capabilities to decide on. Now, governance goes along with the project life cycle, so it depends if you are in a traditional project or you're in an agile project. There will be different stage point reviews, or let's call them stage gate reviews, where some decision makers, like the governance board or steering committee, need to look at the work that you've done to see if it's acceptable and if you can proceed with your project. In traditional projects, the work will be divided by phases, and at the end of every phase, they'll do a phase gate review and they'll decide if you should go forward or not. In agile projects, or what we call adaptive, they split the work into sprints, and at the end of every sprint, we do a demo. We show the work that we've done to the product owner. We take their feedback, see if they're happy. And if they give any feedback, we use that information along with a retrospective, which is a lessons learned session, to improve on the next sprint that we're working on. And we continue to work on sprint after sprint after sprint. Sprint will be similar to phases in a traditional project, except they're only like a couple of weeks. We work on it until we have something that is acceptable as a product. That is what we call an MVP, minimum viable product, which is the minimum set of features that would go into something for it to be called a product that they can release. All right. If it's not an MVP, it's an MBI, which is a minimum business increment, and that would happen later on. So if we already rolled out, let's say the first version of an iPhone, right? This would be the MVP. This is when they rolled it out, I don't know what year. But the first iPhone that was released is the MVP, minimum viable product, for it to be called a smartphone, right? And then the next version of it would have had a small or significant, not small, but it has to have at least a minimum significant change for it to be called iPhone 4, iPhone 5, for you to have a new version of it. So that's called a minimum business increment. So in agile projects, we will work on these sprints until we hit the point where we have either met the minimum business increment or minimum viable product, or what you may call a definition of done, which is having all the features necessary for it to be launched as a product or for it to be released. So going back to traditional project, there are things that we do for governance at the beginning of every phase that we initiate. The three key things that we might do is, number one, validate that all the assumptions that we've made about that phase are still valid, assess the risks associated with that phase, and provide detailed explanations of what the deliverables of that phase would be. At the end of the phase, we review the end result because the work would have been done, and we confirm that it meets the acceptance criteria. If we start to face a lot of risks, or the product becomes no longer needed, or it starts to cost us a lot more, so therefore it's no longer healthy to proceed with this project, we could decide to terminate the project at that point. This is called the kill point. Now, the final piece of this video would be about compliance. As you probably have figured, compliance is a must. Every compliance requirement needs to be understood and needs to be prioritized on the project as a project deliverable, as an objective of your project. And in most projects, thinking about the inability to be able to meet the compliance requirements is one of the things that they would list as a risk item on their risk register. Another thing to know about compliance is that while you're on the project, any of the laws could change, regulations could change, and your project may no longer be in compliance. It is your job as a project manager to be aware of the compliance changes and to make sure that the changes are being made to your project and implemented. Now, what does compliance have to do with the project? Well, there's a lot of standards, laws, policies that need to be applied. There's contractual agreements. You have to comply with these, and you have to meet customer expectations. These are all compliance requirements. From a higher level, at the organization level, if you have a PMO, typically they're overseeing all of this compliance, but at your project level, for the work that you're doing, you need to make sure that you are complying with the standards. If it's engineering, then engineering standards. If it's data, then data privacy standards. Things like that. You need to make sure those are being met. Other types of compliances that you may have are environmental risks, workplace health and safety, ethics and corruption practices, social responsibility, quality standards, and risk associated with the processes that you're working on. But really, the compliances depend on what type of industry you're in and how legally exposed you are to those compliance problems. So when it comes to compliance, you have to know in your organization who is responsible for overseeing the compliance, what sorts of compliances apply to you, what is the organization's quality policy, does it include all of these compliances, and does the team and the rest of the organization understand how to meet those compliances. Because compliance is really important on a project and can be very costly when you violate, you need to treat it as one of the key objectives on your project. And anytime you don't feel confident in the ability to deliver on that compliance, you need to list it on your risk register as a potential risk. It is very important for you to stay on top of these compliances and how risky they are. Maybe do some audits every now and then to make sure that you're able to meet them and that you have the capabilities to meet the compliances. And every time a deliverable is completed, make sure it has met with all of the expected standards and regulations and policies and so on. And also, as you transfer any of these deliverables to your product owner or to your customer, make sure that everything is in check so that you're not transferring over problems with compliance, and then the operational side will be hit with some serious penalties for violating these compliances. So there's 5 best practices when it comes to compliance on how to do it correctly. Number 1 is documentation. We need to make sure we have a documentation of all of the compliance requirements and the risk associated with them. Number 2, risk planning. Make sure you are prioritizing compliance risks when you're analyzing risks so you can deal with them. Now, some organizations would have the PMO handling this part of it, the compliance, or maybe you have a compliance council or a steering committee that deals with compliance. If so, you probably want to engage them in dealing with the compliance risks. Auditing is a good way for you to ensure compliance by reviewing how things are being done in the organization. And finally, everybody needs to know what they own for compliance. So the project, me as a project manager, I have some responsibility when it comes to compliance. And then the project team, technical and otherwise, each has their own responsibility and accountability when it comes to compliance, and the work is split amongst all of us. So those are the 5 best practices: documentation, risk planning, compliance council, auditing, and ownership or stewardship of the compliance. And this brings us to the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. On the next video, we'll start talking about how to start the project, but that's where you're going to find a lot of overlaps with the 45 previous videos that I had published, so I will just be filling the gaps for the things that have not been covered in the 45 videos. Until next time, keep watching the rest of the PMP videos. Get ready. Let me know if you're about to take the exam soon. I'll be curious to know. Let me know if you've been watching the videos. If you're not a subscriber, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you like this video and you would like to see more of this, hit the like button, hit the notification bell. If you think anyone would benefit from these videos, please share with them. Do your good deed for the day. And as a reminder, if you would like to access the Udemy mock exams, you can become a Member Plus on my channel, which will support my effort in providing such videos to you and will allow you to have the 5 full mock exams with 900 questions. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.